An innocent child was framed for a crime, but a police dog's heroic act cleared his name. Tommy ran across the green lawn in the park, barely holding back his laughter. His sneakers lightly touched the ground, and a soft breeze played with his hair. The day was warm and sunny, one of those endless summer afternoons. Just ahead of Tommy was his best friend Max, a sleek and powerful German shepherd with bright, intelligent eyes and an unstoppable energy. Max's tongue lolled out of his mouth as he chased a ball that bounced wildly across the grass. "Good boy, Max," Tommy shouted, clapping his hands as the dog caught up with the ball in a single leap, grabbing it in his jaws and trotting back triumphantly. The sun glinted off Max's dark coat as he pranced toward Tommy, his tail wagging happily. Officer Reyes stood nearby, watching the scene unfold with a smile. Max wasn't just any dog. He was the department's top K9, a dog with countless successes in finding missing people and solving tricky cases. But today, Max wasn't on duty. Today, he was just enjoying the sunshine with Tommy, who adored him like a brother. "Bring it back, Max," Tommy called, his voice filled with joy. Max obeyed instantly, his sharp instincts and unbreakable bond with the boy evident in every step. "You two are inseparable," Officer Reyes chuckled as he strolled over. "If Max ever retires, I think you'll be the first in line to adopt him." "Huh?" Tommy grinned. "Of course. He's the best dog in the world." Reyes leaned down, patting Max's head. "And you're a lucky kid to have him watching over you." For a few minutes, everything seemed perfect. The park was full of life, children playing, birds chirping, the air filled with laughter and the scent of freshly cut grass. Tommy soaked it all in, feeling as though nothing could go wrong. But life has a strange way of taking a sudden turn. It all started with a distant voice. Tommy barely noticed it at first. A woman calling out frantically, "Help! Help! Someone's been robbed!" The peaceful park atmosphere shattered in an instant. People turned toward the commotion, their relaxed expressions replaced with confusion and concern. A woman rushed toward the small crowd that had gathered near a bench, her face pale, her eyes wild with panic. "My jewelry!" she cried, clutching at her empty wrist. "It's gone. Someone stole it from my bag while I was sitting right here." Tommy froze, his heart skipping a beat. Max's ears perked up, his body instantly on alert. He let out a low growl, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Officer Reyes stepped forward, his calm yet commanding presence reassuring the frightened woman. "Ma'am, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened." She took a shaky breath, trying to calm herself. "I put my bracelet and necklace in my bag for safekeeping while I was reading. When I looked back, they were gone. Someone must have taken them." A few murmurs ran through the crowd. People glanced around suspiciously, their eyes darting from face to face, trying to spot the culprit. "I'll handle it," Reyes assured her, reaching for his radio. "No one leave the park. We'll get to the bottom of this." Max stayed at his side, his sharp gaze sweeping the area. His instincts told him something wasn't right, but the real shock was still to come. A voice suddenly cut through the murmurs. It was him, the kid with the dog. Every eye turned toward Tommy. He blinked, stunned. "What? Me?" A tall man with a stern face stepped forward, pointing directly at him. "I saw him near the woman's bag earlier. He must have taken it." Tommy's heart raced, his stomach twisting into knots. "That's not true. I didn't touch her bag. I was playing with Max the whole time." But the man wasn't backing down. "I know what I saw. He was acting suspicious." The murmurs grew louder. Some people nodded in agreement, others looked uncertain. Officer Reyes glanced at Tommy, his brow furrowing. "Tommy," he said gently, "did you go near the bag at any point?" "No." Tommy's voice trembled, but his eyes were steady. "I swear, Officer Reyes, I didn't do anything." Reyes hesitated. He had known Tommy for a long time and trusted him, but the situation was growing serious. The crowd was growing restless, and the accusations were piling up fast. "Let's check his backpack," the man suggested. "If he's innocent, he won't mind, right?" Tommy's blood ran cold. his backpack. He had nothing to hide, but the idea of being treated like a suspect made him feel sick. Reyes knelt beside him. "Tommy, can I take a look? Just to clear this up." Tommy nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Go ahead." Reyes unzipped the backpack and froze. Inside, gleaming in the sunlight, was a delicate gold necklace and matching bracelet, the very ones the woman had described. Gasps filled the air. Tommy stared in shock, his mind spinning. That's not mine. I didn't put those there." Reyes stood, his expression unreadable. The crowd's murmurs turned into accusations. "He did it. He's guilty." Tommy's vision blurred as tears welled in his eyes. He looked at Reyes, pleading silently. "Please, you have to believe me." Reyes glanced at Max, who was growling softly, his eyes fixed on the backpack. Something wasn't adding up. Max had been trained to detect lies, danger, and deception, and right now he wasn't buying any of it. Reyes took a deep breath, raising his hand to silence the crowd. "Everyone, calm down. We'll sort this out properly." But Tommy's world was already crumbling. People were looking at him differently, like he was a criminal. His legs felt like jelly, and his heart pounded in his chest. Max stepped closer to him, pressing against his side, as if to say, "I'm here. I'll protect you." But how could a dog prove innocence? How could Max convince them all that Tommy was being framed? The answer, they would soon discover, lay just beneath the surface of the chaos. The park seemed to grow quieter, yet the tension in the air thickened, making it hard to breathe. Tommy stood frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. The voices around him felt distant, muffled beneath the thudding of his heartbeat. He clutched Max's fur tightly, his only anchor in the storm swirling around him. Officer Reyes kept his eyes on Max. He'd been through too many situations like this to ignore the dog's instincts. Max wasn't just a pet, he was a highly trained K9, capable of detecting things humans would overlook. And right now, Max wasn't acting like Tommy had been caught red-handed. Quite the opposite. "Tommy," Reyes said, his voice steady and calm. "I believe you. Let's figure this out." Tommy blinked, his breath catching in his throat. "Why you do?" Reyes nodded but lowered his voice. "Something about this isn't right. Max can tell. He's never wrong about these things, but convincing the others wouldn't be that easy." The tall man who'd accused Tommy crossed his arms, glaring. "You can't just brush this off. The evidence is right there in his backpack. How much clearer does it need to be?" The woman who'd lost her jewelry was still trembling, her hands clasped together. "Please, I just want my things back." Reyes held up a hand to quiet the crowd. "I understand, but until we know exactly what happened, no one should jump to conclusions. Max and I will investigate further." Tommy felt a sliver of hope pierce through his fear. Max sniffed at the backpack again, his nose twitching rapidly as he inhaled deeply, almost as if trying to decode a hidden message in the air. He let out a soft bark, his eyes locking onto the tall man who'd accused Tommy. Reyes didn't miss it. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the man. "Sir, would you mind sticking around for a bit?" The man hesitated, his confident demeanor cracking just for a moment before he forced a laugh. "Sure, I've got nothing to hide." Max moved closer to the man, sniffing the air around him. His posture was tense, his muscles coiled like a spring. Reyes recognized the signal immediately. Max was picking up a scent, something connected to the stolen items. Reyes crouched beside Max, patting his back. "What is it, boy? Did you catch something?" Max barked twice, his tail wagging in short, sharp movements. Reyes had seen this behavior before. It meant Max had found a trail. His instincts had locked onto something, and it was only a matter of time before he uncovered the truth. Tommy watched, his fear slowly giving way to curiosity. "Do you think he knows who really did it?" Reyes gave a small smile. "He just might." Without wasting another second, Reyes stood up. "Max, track." Max bolted forward, nose low to the ground, his body a blur of focused motion. The crowd parted as he sped toward a cluster of benches near the playground. Reyes and Tommy followed close behind, their hearts pounding in sync with the dog's determined strides. Max circled the benches, sniffing every corner before freezing near a trash can. He barked sharply, pawing at the ground. Reyes bent down, gently moving aside some leaves and debris, and there it was, a small black leather pouch. He opened it carefully, revealing more jewelry inside. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tommy's eyes widened. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." Reyes held up the pouch, showing it to the woman. "Ma'am, does this belong to you?" Her hands flew to her mouth. "Yes, that's my other bracelet. And my earrings." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, shifting from suspicion to confusion. Reyes glanced at the tall man again, his expression unreadable. "Looks like the thief didn't manage to escape with everything." The man shrugged, his eyes darting left and right. "Maybe the kid dropped it while he was running." Reyes tilted his head, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Funny, Tommy wasn't running anywhere. He's been with me and Max the entire time." The man's face darkened, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of what to say. Max wasn't done yet. His nose twitched furiously, and he pulled at his leash, barking insistently. Reyes followed him again, feeling the excitement build in his chest. Max was onto something big, and if he knew his partner well, they were close to cracking the case wide open. They stopped at a picnic table near the edge of the park. Max sniffed beneath it, then barked, pawing at the ground once more. Reyes bent down, lifting the tablecloth that hung over the edge, and there it was, a small, discarded glove. A strange scent clung to it, something metallic and sharp, like grease mixed with sweat. Reyes held it up carefully. "Max, did this come from the person we're looking for?" Max barked twice, his way of saying yes. Reyes turned back to the crowd, holding the glove in plain sight. Whoever wore this glove was at the scene of the crime. Max's nose doesn't lie. The tension in the air was electric. Tommy felt a rush of relief, but it was tempered with confusion. Who could have planted the jewelry in his backpack? And why? Reyes studied the glove closely, then glanced at the tall man one last time. The man's face had gone pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Max stepped closer to him, growling low in his throat. "Sir," Reyes said, his voice calm but firm, "would you mind explaining why Max seems so interested in you?" The tall man shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Max and the glove in Reyes' hand. His confident facade was crumbling fast, and the growing stares from the onlookers only added to the pressure. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, forcing a weak chuckle. "That's just a coincidence. The dog's probably confused." Max's steady growl grew deeper, his sharp gaze locked on the man. Officer Reyes knew that growl well. It wasn't confusion, it was certainty. Max had found his target, and there was no mistaking it. "Max isn't confused," Reyes said, his voice steady and commanding. "He's trained to track down scents connected to evidence. And right now, he's telling me that glove and the jewelry are connected to you." The man opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He glanced around, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd had formed a wide circle around him, their expressions shifting from curiosity to suspicion. Tommy watched with a mix of fear and hope, his fists clenched at his sides. For the first time since this nightmare started, it felt like there was a chance someone might believe him. Reyes stepped closer, holding up the glove. "Sir, I'll ask you one more time. Do you have anything to say about this?" The man's eyes flicked to the glove, then to Max, then back to Reyes. His breathing grew heavier, and sweat trickled down his temple. Finally, he shook his head. "I didn't do anything. This is ridiculous." "Then you won't mind if we take this glove back to the station for testing," Reyes said, his eyes never leaving the man's face. "If it's clean, you've got nothing to worry about." The man's lips tightened, his jaw clenching. "Fine, do whatever you want." Reyes nodded, slipping the glove into an evidence bag. "We'll also be reviewing the park security footage. Just to be thorough." The man's face went a shade paler. Footage? He echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Reyes said calmly. There are cameras at both entrances to the park and several near the playground. It shouldn't be too hard to figure out who planted that jewelry in Tommy's bag. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder again. People glanced at each other, whispering theories and questions. The once confident accuser was now the center of their scrutiny, and it was clear the tide was turning. Max, still at Reyes' side, barked once more, short and sharp, a final confirmation. Reyes turned to Tommy, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You've been telling the truth from the start. We'll get to the bottom of this. Tommy nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. Thank you, Officer Reyes. Thank you, Mac. But before anyone could say another word, the tall man spun on his heel and bolted. He shoved through the crowd, sprinting toward the park's exit with panic in his eyes. Stop! Reyes shouted, already in motion. Max, go! Max took off like a bullet, his powerful legs eating up the distance between him and the fleeing man. His focus was razor-sharp, his instincts kicking into overdrive as he closed the gap. The man glanced over his shoulder, his face twisted in fear as he realized Max was gaining on him. He zigzagged through the park, knocking over trash cans and weaving between benches in a desperate attempt to shake the dog, but Max was relentless. The crowd gasped as Max leaped over a low hedge, landing just a few feet behind the man. With a final burst of speed, Max lunged, his teeth gripping the man's sleeve and pulling him to the ground. Reyes was there a second later, cuffs in hand. You should have stayed to answer my questions. The man struggled for a moment, but it was no use. Max stood over him, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on the man's face as if daring him to make another move. All right, the man finally gasped, his chest rising and falling rapidly. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. Reyes exchanged a look with Max before nodding. Good choice. Tommy stood at a distance, his heart pounding in his chest. The tension that had gripped him for what felt like an eternity was finally starting to lift. Max had done it. He had proven Tommy's innocence. The man sat on the ground, his head hanging low. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered. I was just trying to make a quick buck. I didn't think it would go this far. Reyes crossed his arms. You framed a kid and planted evidence in his backpack. I'd say it went plenty far. The man shook his head, wiping sweat from his face. I panicked. I saw the kid playing with the dog, and I figured no one would ever suspect him. It was easy. Too easy. Reyes shook his head in disbelief. Well, you're about to face the consequences. He turned back to the crowd, his voice loud and clear. This young man was innocent all along. Thanks to Max, we found the real culprit. The crowd erupted in applause, their earlier suspicion replaced with admiration for Tommy and Max. Some people clapped him on the back, while others crouched to pet Max, praising him for his bravery. Tommy's parents pushed through the crowd, wrapping him in a tight hug. His mother's eyes were filled with tears. We knew you didn't do it, sweetheart. We never doubted you. Max trotted over, nuzzling Tommy's hand. Tommy smiled through his tears, crouching to hug the dog. Thank you, Max. You saved me. Reyes watched the scene with a warm smile. He's a good boy, all right. The best partner anyone could ask for. Tommy stood, wiping his eyes. Can I still throw the ball for him? You know, just to celebrate. Reyes chuckled. I think he'd like that. Tommy grabbed the ball, tossing it across the park. Max took off after it, his tail wagging furiously, the same boundless energy as before. For the first time in what felt like forever, everything was right again. Max had cleared Tommy's name, but more importantly, he'd reminded everyone of a simple truth. Sometimes, the most loyal heroes walk on four legs. Officer Reyes stood silently for a moment, taking it all in. The air in the park was lighter now, the tension finally broken. Max sat proudly beside Tommy, his chest rising and falling steadily, eyes still watchful but calm. The case wasn't just solved. It had been a dramatic lesson for everyone about trust, courage, and the power of a well-trained dog with instincts sharper than any human. But there was still more to uncover. Reyes glanced down at the man, who now sat quietly on the ground, handcuffed and defeated. "We're not done yet," he said. "You framed a kid, but I've got a feeling this isn't the first time you've tried something like this." The man looked up with tired eyes, his shoulders slumping. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he muttered. "I thought I could slip in, grab a few things, and no one would notice. But then, things got messy." Reyes narrowed his eyes. "Messy how?" The man hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. His eyes flicked to Max, and for a split second, fear flickered across his face. "There were other things, other break-ins. I needed the cash, fast." "You mean other thefts in the neighborhood?" Reyes pressed, his voice sharp. The man nodded reluctantly. "Yeah. A few houses, some parked cars. I take whatever I could sell quick. I never hurt anyone. I swear." Reyes shook his head, his jaw tightening. "No, but you hurt people all the same. You made them feel unsafe in their own homes. You took something from them that can't be replaced." He turned to Max, who seemed to be waiting for his next command. "Looks like we're not done tracking evidence yet. Boy, you up for one more?" Max barked once, his tail wagging slightly. Reyes faced the small crowd that had remained. "We're going to follow Max's lead. There might be more stolen property nearby." Tommy's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Can I help? I mean, Max and we work pretty well together." Reyes smiled. "I think Max would like that." Tommy stood up, his fear completely replaced by excitement. He followed Max closely as the dog sniffed the ground, retracing steps toward the park's edge. Max paused every few feet, his nose twitching, eyes scanning the area as if calculating his next move. His energy was unwavering, driven by his instinct to complete the task. After a few minutes, Max led them to a cluster of thick bushes behind the playground. He growled softly and began pawing at the dirt beneath the tangled branches. Reyes crouched beside him, carefully moving the foliage aside. His fingers brushed against something hard and metallic. He dug a little deeper, revealing a small metal box partially buried in the dirt. Reyes pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside were several small bags filled with stolen items, watches, bracelets, and wallets that had likely been taken over the past few weeks. Tommy gasped. "That's a lot of stuff." Reyes nodded grimly. "This confirms it. He's been hiding his stash here between jobs." He stood, holding the box in one hand while resting the other on Max's head. "Good work, partner." Max barked in response, his eyes gleaming with pride. As Reyes walked back toward the man in cuffs, he held up the box. "Looks like we've got everything we need. You won't just be answering for today. You'll be facing charges for every theft tied to these items." The man hung his head, knowing there was no way out now. The crowd murmured quietly, their earlier fear now replaced with awe and admiration for Max's incredible skills. Tommy's parents stepped forward, their expressions soft but serious. "Thank you, Officer Reyes," Tommy's dad said, shaking his hand. "And thank you, Max. I don't know what we would have done without you." Reyes gave a small nod. "You raised a good kid." He stayed calm and strong through all of this. "That's not easy." Tommy blushed slightly but couldn't hide his grin. "I just knew Max wouldn't let me down." Reyes knelt beside him. "No, he didn't. And you didn't let him down either. You listened, stayed honest, and trusted him. That makes you a team." Tommy hugged Max once more, burying his face in the dog's soft fur. "You're the best dog in the world." Max let out a soft whine of contentment, his eyes half closing in satisfaction. Reyes looked around at the lingering crowd. "This case is closed, thanks to Max. But remember, sometimes it's the small clues that make the biggest difference. And sometimes our best detectives walk on four legs." The crowd clapped again, their applause echoing through the park. As they began to disperse, Tommy stood beside Max, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. For the first time that day, he felt light, free. He had Max to thank for that. Reyes watched them quietly for a moment before placing a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Come by the station anytime. Max will be happy to see you." Tommy nodded eagerly. "I will." Max barked one last time, as if to seal the promise. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, the park returned to its peaceful state. But for Tommy, Max, and Officer Reyes, it was a day they'd never forget. A day that proved heroes come in all shapes and sizes, some with sharp instincts, unwavering loyalty, and a wagging tail. Officer Reyes stood for a moment, savoring the victory, but also reflecting on the long road ahead for Tommy. Although the situation had been resolved in the park, the emotional scars would take time to heal. Tommy had faced public humiliation, unfair accusations, and the heavy weight of being seen as something he wasn't. Reyes crouched next to him, his tone soft but serious. "Tommy, listen to me. What happened today wasn't your fault. There will always be people who jump to conclusions or see what they want to see. But you showed courage and stayed true to yourself. That's what matters most." Tommy looked up at Reyes, his eyes still wide with emotion. "I thought everyone was going to hate me forever, that they'd always think I was a thief." Reyes shook his head firmly. "People make mistakes, but they also learn. What Max did today isn't just about clearing your name. It's about showing the world that truth always finds a way. And you helped him do that." Tommy nodded slowly, processing those words. Max, standing protectively by his side, leaned into him as if to say, "I've got you. Always." The crowd had mostly dispersed, but a few remained, watching quietly from a distance. Among them were some of Tommy's classmates, kids who had been quick to whisper and point when the accusation started. Now they approached him cautiously, their expressions filled with regret. One of the boys, a tall kid named Alex, shuffled his feet awkwardly. "Hey Tommy, we're really sorry. We shouldn't have believed what that guy said about you." Another girl chimed in, her voice soft but sincere. "Yeah, we were wrong. You're not a thief. You're kind of a hero, actually. You and Mac." Tommy blinked in surprise, a small smile breaking across his face. "Thanks, guys." Alex nodded, extending a hand. "Friends?" Tommy shook his hand firmly. "Friends." Max gave an approving bark, wagging his tail as if to seal the deal. Reyes watched the exchange with a satisfied nod. "Looks like things are already turning around." He motioned for Tommy and his parents to follow him toward the patrol car. "We'll need to head back to the station for a full report, but I'll make sure this ends the right way. No loose ends." Tommy climbed into the car, Max hopping up beside him. The police vehicle felt safe, like a shield against everything that had happened. Tommy leaned back in the seat, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He rested his head on Max's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of the dog's breathing. "You really are a hero, Max," Tommy whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." Max responded with a soft nuzzle, his warm breath ruffling Tommy's hair. The drive back to the station was quiet, the tension slowly melting away. Reyes drove with a calm focus, his eyes scanning the road but occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at the boy and his dog. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. Not just for Max but for Tommy, too. Few kids could have handled a situation like that with such strength. At the station, things moved quickly. The tall man was booked and processed, his long list of petty crimes laid bare for all to see. The evidence Max had found was catalogued, ready to be returned to its rightful owners. It was a clean case, a rare thing in Reyes' line of work. After filing the last report, Reyes found Tommy and his parents waiting in the lounge. Max sat calmly at Tommy's feet, his eyes closed but his ears twitching slightly, always alert even in moments of rest. "Well," Reyes said, folding his arms, "looks like that's it. Case closed." Tommy's dad stepped forward, shaking Reyes' hand firmly. "Thank you for everything, Officer Reyes. You believed in our son when it felt like no one else did." Reyes smiled. "It was Max who believed first. I just listened to him." Tommy's mom knelt beside Max, scratching behind his ears. "You're a very good boy, Max. A very good boy." Max wagged his tail slowly, enjoying the praise but remaining ever composed. "Can we come visit him?" Tommy asked, his voice filled with hope. "I mean, when he's not too busy solving crimes?" Reyes chuckled. "You're welcome anytime. Max will always be happy to see you." Tommy hugged Max one last time before standing. "I'll be back soon. Promise." Reyes escorted them to the front door, watching as they disappeared into the fading light of early evening. The world seemed a little brighter now, a little safer, thanks to one dog's unshakable loyalty and instincts. As Reyes walked back inside, Max at his side, he couldn't help but reflect on the day. It was the kind of case that reminded him why he became a police officer in the first place. Not just to catch criminals, but to protect the innocent and set things right when they went wrong. "Good job today, Max," he said, patting the dog on the head. "Let's get some rest. Something tells me we've got more work waiting for us tomorrow." Max barked softly, his eyes gleaming with readiness, even after everything they'd been through. For him, the job was never truly done. Reyes smiled. "That's my partner." As they walked into the station together, the door swinging shut behind them, the world outside settled into calm once again. But for those who had been there, who had seen what unfolded in the park that day, one thing was clear. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes, some with sharp minds, brave hearts, and paws that never stop moving forward. Tommy sat on the front steps of the police station, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. Max sat beside him, calm and steady, his warm presence comforting after everything that had happened. For the first time in what felt like forever, Tommy felt free, like the weight of the world had finally lifted from his small shoulders. His parents stood a few steps behind, quietly talking with Officer Reyes. Tommy caught snippets of their conversation. Words like grateful and bravery drifted through the air, but all Tommy could focus on was Max, who had stayed by his side every step of the way. "Max," Tommy whispered, scratching behind the dog's ear, "you're not just a hero, you're my best friend." Max's tail thumped softly against the ground in response, his bright eyes gleaming in the fading light. It was almost as if he understood every word. Officer Reyes approached, smiling warmly. "Tommy, I think Max has a message for you." Tommy laughed. "A message?" Reyes crouched beside him, ruffling Max's fur. "He's telling you to stay brave and always trust your instincts. You've got good ones, just like him." Tommy grinned, the warmth of those words settling deep inside him. "I'll try my best." Reyes stood, extending a hand toward Tommy. "Come back and visit, okay? Max will want to see his partner again." "I will," Tommy promised, shaking Reyes' hand. "I'll never forget what you both did for me." As the family walked toward their car, Tommy looked back one last time. Max stood at the door of the station, watching him with unwavering focus. It felt like a silent promise, a reminder that no matter what, Max would always be watching out for him. "Bye, Max," Tommy called, waving. Max barked once, his tail wagging in farewell. The door closed behind them, but Tommy felt no sadness. He knew this wasn't an end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Max had saved him, not just from the accusation, but from losing faith in himself. As they drove away, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one. Tommy leaned against the window, feeling a quiet strength settle into his chest. No matter what came next, he knew he could face it. After all, heroes came in all shapes and sizes. And sometimes they had 4 legs, sharp eyes, and hearts as big as the sky. And Tommy knew one thing for sure: he had the best hero of them all.